Hi, everyone. I'm Jennifer Ing, and I am one of the co-hosts, along with Luke Bailey, of the Cosmic Pulse, part of the IAA, the International Academy of Astrology and Astrocollege community. And Luke Bailey is our new brilliant owner of IAA and Astrocollege. Welcome, Luke.
Thanks, Jennifer. We're just starting this out in a new generation of the Cosmic Pulse, aren't we? So we're going to start with a bit of an introduction as to where we're at, and I was also going to ask you a couple of questions along the way too.
Sure. And but the main topic of this introduction podcast, the first episode of our new generation of the Cosmic Pulse, is me interviewing Luke about your techniques, about the introduction to picking winners using astrology.
Yes, it's been a very interesting journey, that one, and over many, many years of how would I put it, investigation. And I'm getting pretty close to having it down pat, but there's a bit of a story behind it, and there's a few hiccups along the way, and I don't think you're able to pick every single one. That's not that simple, because a lot of other features and factors. I think you probably could if you knew all the techniques and knew how to analyze it all. But I'm not exactly at that level. I don't think anyone will be, because you've always got the odds a little bit against you. But I can guarantee you, if certain things are there astrologically, you can pretty much pick the winner every time when they're there. Yeah.
And possibly monetize off of that
Absolutely. I mean,
because,
that's part
yeah.
and parcel of it. I can tell you a lot of little stories about that. Jen, if you like, why don't I just sort of give you a little bit of background, okay, on a number of things, but let's go definitely into the astrology of horse racing. That came about primarily because my interest in astrology, I started out as a 16-year-old trying to disprove astrology, because one of my friends says, he shows me this chart, and he says to me, I said, "What's that?" This is a guy I was doing some martial arts with at the time, who ended up becoming he ran the only ninjutsu school in Australia, and he's
Oh,
now a
nice.
professor, called Robert, in Newcastle in New South Wales. And Rob's a lovely guy, but he was sitting there, and I was saying, "What's that?" And I've actually got his original hand drawn chart that he did. He gave it to me years later, because I went off into the astrology and he went off into martial arts. But my introduction to astrology was, "Here you go, have a look at this." And I go, "What's that?" And so I went through, and he explained to me, "Look, this is how the astrology chart works. This is my rising sign, and this is this, and all you really know about is your sun sign." And I went, "So you're an Aries, and I'm a Capricorn, but I don't sound anything like a Capricorn." He goes, "Well," I said, "That's, pardon the expression, that's just a crock. That can't be right. I don't believe any of it." He said, "Well, have you ever had a chart done?" And I went, "No." He goes, "Well, how can you say it's a crock?" And I went,
Good
"Yeah,
point.
fair enough. All right." So I said, "How do I do that?" So anyway, he gave me some photocopies out of the ephemeris, which is the planetary tables. He gave me a photocopy out of what they call the table of houses, which shows,
Mhm.
basically the angles for the houses and all that sort of stuff. And you can work and calculate it from there, and your rising sign and the rest of it, and the divisions of the chart, and then a blank chart and a book on how to do it, and said, "Here, knock yourself out." And I went, "Oh, okay, great." Lucky I was 16 and still used to studying. That's all I can say. And I was mathematically based. So I sat there and worked my own chart out. But from there, what I then did was I started reading about what each, aspect meant, what the rising sign meant. And I started reading book after book after book.
Oh,
And
can I just ask you, what
yeah,
books did you have at access? Like
oh
any
God.
authors that are
Um,
still used or
At the
referenced today?
time, at the time, look, I started off with the basic sort of how to calculate astrology type books. I think my very first little book was of interpretation was, um, I think I can't remember his name, Francis Sequoia or something, a little one on the little but I've got it still here somewhere. But ultimately, what I did was Rob had a lot of books, and one after the other, he just gave them to me to read, because he'd been reading them and he'd been studying astrology. And he said, "Here, check this out." And he was always somebody that went deep into everything, and and his knowledge, his ability to pick things up was very good. So he'd be saying, "Oh, check this out. This is what another thing they do." And you look at transformational stuff, and this is what Pluto does, and this is what this one does, and this is what this one does. But I sort of focus on a number of books. I liked Stephen Arroyo's stuff. I don't know if that's how you pronounce his surname, Arroyo or Arroyo, but he was very good.
Mm-hmm.
I liked his basic understandings of the things like the elements, the four elements. There was a lot of Dane Rudhyar's books I was
Yes.
reading. There was, but then I came around to things like the combination of stellar influences, which was a cosmobiology book. Which, for those who
Oh,
don't
nice.
know, is using the 90-degree dial, but it's also very much based on
Midpoints.
midpoints. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that the relationship between midpoints, and this is where I'm going with this, Jen, because there's a reason behind why I'm saying this. So the midpoint showed that when planets formed specific angles, they triggered events. And I thought, why is that happening? Why are these guys, someone like Reinhold Everton, able to be able to put a book together based on a historical events and the likely outcomes, both physiologically, socially, psychologically, and physical outcome events, as well as bodily, like biology wise as well. And when they come together, then they had specific, nearly like rules. And if you think about it, that's when I became interested, and I met someone like Kevin Barrett, and he was into Vedic astrology, and they always everything is based on rules. And it's primarily those rules and how they work, and the balancing of, if you got this and you got this and you got this, then it equals that. And if you've got three of those in the chart and you've got none that counterbalance it, then chances are that's going to happen to you, and you can predict approximately when, based on the planetary energies that are involved. So this was, to me, a technique I thought, but when you're a young student, it's mind-boggling the amount of information you have to learn. And I remember Kevin saying to me, I'm going a bit off topic for a minute, but I'll tell you what he said. Do you remember Jim Jones and the whole mass suicide? Led anyone, Jonestown, and he led people to mass suicide. Do you remember that back in the 80s? I don't know.
This,
Some people
yeah,
may do, and you can
yes.
look it up. So it was
Yes,
Jonestown.
yes,
He
yes,
had,
yes,
and it
yes.
was the old adage, they drank the Kool-Aid and that killed them,
Right, right.
right? Yeah. So he was, at the time, I remember Kevin had gone, he'd had a trucking business for many years in Australia, and then he sort of retired from that and sold it. And basically, I would say, went on a midlife crisis pilgrimage over to India. And when he went over there, he lived in some of the ashrams for a while and studied with some astrologers. And he learned and learned and learned and learned and learned. So here he was, probably at the time, I'd say he would have been in his early to mid 60s. And when I was dealing with him on a fairly regular basis. And he came to me and he said, well, look, one of the things that I find, is there's a lot of stuff in astrology out there, the books that you read. He said, and I agreed with him. He said, a lot of them are based now on opinion, not necessarily on fact. So in other words, someone has a philosophy or an understanding or how they've experienced, and they write those in the book. So I've got a lot of books I call, how would I put it? They're really good psychological astrology books. They give you a really good insights into certain ways in which things work, but they don't give you answers as to how it's going to work, when it's going to work, and what's going to happen. And a lot of people come to astrologers for that. And I'll go back to Kevin in a minute, but that's sort of why I got into the astrology of horse racing. Okay. I got into it because I wanted to know in advance if the planets had a physical effect on us. So whether they could influence the outcome of an event. So I needed something that I knew when it was going to happen, where it was going to happen, um, that
And
had an
something
outcome
very,
that was
yeah,
a short
verifiable.
duration. Yeah, so very reliable. The only reliable event that I knew when it was going to start and finish was pretty much a horse race. Yes, you'd sometimes say start late, and that does make a difference to you picking the winner.
Yeah.
But the general gist is, I could then look at it and say, okay, if I look at the planets, does one planet influence more the winner than the other? And the answer to that
Can
was
I
yes.
ask you, was it easy to find this industry or field for this kind of test? Like, were there other
No. I
situations?
no,
Like I'm thinking car racing, like
no.
NASCAR or Olympics.
I didn't look at that sort of thing because I wanted something that was regular. Horse racing
Ah,
happens everywhere. Right?
yeah,
It happens all the
worldwide,
time. It's
every
basically
weekend.
daily. And
Yes.
and I'll explain that a little bit more in a minute. But I'll go back to Kevin for a second, but and
Okay.
explain to you why that correlated to me leading down that path.
Okay.
And so Kevin had said to me this. He said that when I'm going back to Jim Jones and the whole Jonestown, and you've got to remember that back in the 80s, even the early 90s, we didn't have internet. There was no such thing. So
Oh, I
you didn't have
remember.
this.
Yes.
This was not there. If you wanted to contact someone overseas, you wrote them a letter. You stick it in an envelope and off it went, and you
Oh,
waited
yeah.
for a
Yeah.
couple of
Yeah.
months for them to come back to you.
Yep.
By that stage, so much has changed anyway. It's very different. Or you got on the phone and you called.
Yeah. Long distance
Yeah. And those
charges.
phone calls cost you a fortune, especially if you're calling internationally. And not only that, they weren't very reliable. I mean, I
And the
remember.
phone was glued to the wall, or
Yeah,
you had to dial. You had to wait. Like if you had a 9 or a 0, you'd have to go and wait for go.
yeah. And that actual process is called decadic dialing. Tick, 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 tick. And it literally counts to through the numbers. So, and then when you heard, and the other thing from a communication point of view is they upgraded that to do 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 when you press the button, and that's called dual
Yes.
tone multi-frequency or DTMF.
Oh,
So that's using
okay.
frequencies to activate the number. So that's an interest.
Oh,
That's a whole other part of my life
all
that
right.
I've gone through. I used to do a lot of stuff in that area, but
Tech.
so that's you're right. So this was the thing, and I was there with that whole transition to mobile phone and very interesting. The big bricks next to people's ears and all that sort of
Yep.
stuff, and the phone around in a case. I had one of those. I used to have it in the
Wow.
had it in the car. And back then, you used to just pick it up and answer the phone, as you're driving. No
It,
one
it you
cared.
had a phone in your
In the
car. Like
car.
that was rare.
And it
Like
was
I only
battery
saw that in the
packed.
movies.
Yeah, exactly. One
Like
of those. That's what it was. Yeah, I worked in technology stuff and I was on the road, so I had no choice.
so
But
you were like on the cutting edge.
yes, of all that sort of stuff. Yes, yeah. And nowadays you'd think it was archaic. I've still got some of the old phones. I keep them in a box somewhere. Little Siemens phones and Ericsson phones and stuff like that, and
Those are
the
like
old
vintage now.
Blackberries. When you tap tap tap.
Right.
Yeah.
Pagers.
Mm-hmm.
This is all
Oh, well,
pre-smartphone,
that's what.
pre-iPhone, like before
Yeah.
2009.
Yeah, well, back in 1989, that's what I started doing, selling radio paging systems to
Oh,
places like
cool.
hospitals and prisons and you name it.
Oh,
So
cool.
little pages for on-site paging.
Oh,
Yeah.
right, right.
So that's where it all started. And they were all connected to telephone systems. That's why I had to know
Right.
how to integrate them.
Meanwhile,
So
for kids, it was Fisher Price walkie-talkies.
that's it. That's right. We're a little bit off
Okay.
topic, but we're getting there.
Yeah.
So I come back to Jim Jones and Jim. The thing with Jim Jones and then what happened there is that Kevin came across his birth details quite accurately. So someone had actually published them somewhere. So he took the birth details and he looked at the chart of Jim Jones and he's gone, yeah, well, I can see it, but I don't understand, why he's gone and done what he did. I can see the different evangelistic sort of things in his chart and all the rest of it, but I'm not sure why. So he said, I did a test, Luke. I sent the birth details to my friends in India that I worked with over there. And he said, all I did was I said, can you give me 10 key points about this person's life? This is somebody I need to understand I'm dealing with. He didn't tell them the details. Back then, there's no one sitting in an ashram in India would have had any idea who Jim Jones was or what he was or even the situation. Would probably never even heard of the event. Okay.
Right, because that's 12th house stuff, right? You're in
Yeah.
solitude
Yeah, that's
and
right. And
communing with
it's
the
just not
divine and
even there.
meditating. Yeah.
So he said, a couple of months later, he gets a letter back, and the letter states a point form what this person would do. And one of the lines was he would commit mass murder. Now,
Wow.
so Kevin's like, how the hell did they get that? How the hell were they able to predict that out of the chart? Like he was like dumbfounded with all of his knowledge. He said, I was so frustrated with it, I rang them up, got on the phone to India. And he said, it cost me a fortune. He said, but I finally got through and I'm talking to them. And they said, Kevin, You're too young to know that. You've got more to learn. He goes, I couldn't
Interesting.
believe it. And he said, here I am about 65 years of age or whatever it was
He's
at
too
the time, of
young.
63, something like that. And he goes, I'm being told I'm too young to know. I've got more to learn first before I'll understand. So, you know, when you talk about astrology being an ancient science, it really is that ancient science. And we have lost some of that. And part of why I've taken over, or I should say taken over, or purchased the curriculum and want to sort of revitalize the IAA and taken over from Ina. We had lots of conversations, Ina and I, prior, and
Ina,
she
the
was
founder.
not going to
Yeah.
give the school to anyone. I can tell you that now. So she had to be very comfortable, and we both had to have very similar sort of vision for the future, and that's where we came together, and that's why I've done this. But as part of that, if I could say anything to people who are watching the podcast, and that is the astrological community, which is only just in the process of being set up. So by the time this gets out there, it'll be just about set up, and ongoing it will be, and you'll see the difference. The idea of it is to bring astrology to the people. I just feel that, and I know that it's been misunderstood for a long time. I also know that people are a little bit disillusioned. I'm not saying I get a bit disillusioned sometimes, because from where I sit, my astrological studies with astrology of horse racing is been looking for why astrology works, the physical reason, i.e., the scientific reason, science. I'm not
Right,
talking.
verifiable.
I'm talking about science. I want to know the physical reasons, as we exist on the planet. The issue that we have a little bit is that sometimes I think, from me personally, that scientists who think in a quantum field up until recently may have been ridiculed by their own community. So, in other words, as an astrologer, you've got the other extreme, where you've got people who are very astrological, esoteric as such.
But physics
This is
does
busy.
have a very philosophical
That's right. So,
uh, piece to it.
yeah, and I think where we're at now is that the new generations, the younger generations, know there's something more. They know they're a little bit. Some of them are disillusioned by religion. Some of them are disillusioned by science. Some of them go, I can't believe anything I'm told anymore. Life doesn't appear to be what I thought it was, and that's so basically. I feel that there's a big need to bring astrology to the people in a form that's not filtered, controlled, or marketed in such a way to make it appear to be a pseudoscience, because it isn't.
Yeah.
And when you look at things like the events that happen with, say, Kevin, he still, I'm sure he went to his grave still not knowing how that happened, right? I didn't speak to him prior because I wasn't aware at the time, and I'd moved away. And then I found out he'd passed away later. But, I'll even let you in on a secret there. He told me that he'd worked out when he was going to pass away, and he calculated it himself. He got it wrong because he passed away way before. But there's another reasoning behind that possibly as well. And that could be the things like, lifestyle, what you do to your body, how you are. You might see that what he probably saw was the trajectory of when it's likely that he might pass. But if you do, I'll give you another example of that. That's to me is free will versus fate. And when I say free will, you might know that it's not a great thing to go and take drugs or drink yourself to death. I'm not saying he did, but I'm just saying that's an example. But if you did, and you wondered why you didn't live out your full life, that could be the reason.
Right.
So you've got to you make choices along the way as to what you want to do. And I think there were certain things that he may have done that maybe shortened his existence on the planet as such, less than he did. So I don't think maybe he got around to doing some of the things he wanted to do. That's my sort of firm belief from there. But anyway, that's digressing. Let's get back to the horse racing stuff, if you like, and I'll explain. So that's in essence why I decided to do and look into the astrology of horse racing. So the
And I know you've got decades that you've been
yeah, I started this.
researching and working on this.
Yeah, I started doing this. I think around 1990, maybe. I can't remember exactly. At 90, yeah, it would have been about 1990, 91, 92, perhaps around that time, because I used to do lectures on it at the Sydney Astrological Research Society. And it was funny because I had people, I don't know if you heard some Australian astrologers called Ray Webb, and there was Ray and Kevin was another one, and they'd be sitting up the back of the or the FAA, the Federation of Australian Astrologers. I'd do talks there, and I often did talks on the how and why astrology works. But as part of that, the horse racing sort of came as an adjunct to that. And someone who got really involved in that, who was getting into astrology for the first time, sitting up the back of the class listening to me, was a gentleman called Greg Clare. So Greg, used to spend a fair bit of time working on the philosophies and the thoughts and the way in which I did. And then I think he's got his own philosophies and does it very, very well, using the astronomy side of it as well, which is more the traditional. And this is what you're talking about: traditional astrology, modern astrology, classical astrology, Hellenistic. There's sort of, they're all under different banners, but they're all similar banners, but they all just work differently, like Vedic. They're all different systems, you could say. However, what I found was in some of the modern astrology stuff, it missed some of the basics of interpretation, i.e., or prediction is probably the better word for it. That's what I found. It wasn't quite as easy to predict because there was no one back in the 60s and 70s who really carried through the old techniques. They'd sort of been lost for a while. Astrology got pushed into an area of being a game or something that it was banned.
Like pop culture
Yeah,
too,
sort of like it was.
like
It
in the
was a lot of things. Now,
newspaper, magazines.
excuse me, this was before my time, but but as a teenager growing up, and when I first started looking at it as a 16-year-old, I went, wow, there's something more to this, and that's really what got me involved in it, if you know what I mean. So by the time it came around, so I was in my early 20s, and I had gone through a stage where I learned a lot. Then I realized I really didn't know anything. And then I thought, I got to hang on, there's more to it. And I mean, I went through lots of stuff. I investigated. So when I was going through the how and whys, I was looking at Percy Seymour's stuff and Michael Gauquelin. I don't know how to pronounce his surname half the time.
Yeah, I think Gauquelin,
Gauquelin
the
or
French.
Gauquelin, yeah. Who had done all the statistical, and I've still got some. I've got his original books where it's all printed out in just the statistic form, right?
Vintage.
I was given them by a lady called Gwen Stoney, who's a lovely Australian astrologer from many, many years ago. And she was another one. I went to her place and I was helping with. And she said, "Here, take these with your research." So I was researching a lot of this stuff and checking it all out. And I did a lecture on harmonics, looking at whether you multiply a chart by a number, basically to give it a different vibrational frequency. Does it impact how somebody responds to things? And can you see further parts of that particular person's personality, psyche, inspiration, aspirations, their chart, and all that sort of stuff? So, and then I chose a particular person for that, which was Jeffrey Dahmer, because I got his accurate birth time. I thought, okay, I want to know if I can see a crazy person. And then I used Reinhold Evertson's book, and I looked at the midpoints and I looked at the aspects, and what was coming up in what inspires this person was actually something that when you read the definitions out of Reinhold Evertson's book, he was the crazy, psychopathic, murderous person that he was. And it was all there. And I went, wow. So that's something I haven't finished investigating, but it's another interesting topic. But why was I doing that? I was doing it because I wanted to know why and if the planets had a physical effect. And that led me to the horse racing. And I reckon it was early 90s, like I said. And then I decided, all right, I'm going to look. And so basically I worked on a simple principle to start with. And the simple principle was, if I have a planet sitting directly above me at the time of the race, and I don't necessarily mean directly above me, because it's the midheaven point, which could be off to the side, but it's basically where its effect on the Earth is the most at that moment in time is directly the most present it will be. It's directly
Or the pinnacle.
the pinnacle of the chart.
Yeah, yeah.
So as a planet crosses that point in the day, if a race goes off, does that planet have more of an effect on the outcome of the winner? And what I found was, yes, it does. And I can say that categorically from the beginning because I picked 10 winners in a row.
Can I just interject there? And
Yeah.
it's beautiful you say that, because in horary, and on the midheaven is a prominent angle,
Yeah.
and that's the premise that we all learn, that when you have a planet on one of the angles, and the 10th and the first are very important ones. So that just is like evidence to support astrological principles that we're
That's
taught.
exactly right. So, and that's literally what I was testing, you could say. Now, where it fell down, and this is the interesting part, is that we had a situation by, so I had 10 winners in a row. Did I bet on those races? Yeah, I put a little bit of money on. Back then, I had to go to the tab, put the ticket in, give them the cash, get the ticket, then go on and listen to the radio on the race on the radio, because see who was winning. There was no internet like we have. There was no online betting. There was no anything. So I literally sort of picked these horses, and I remember, I'll give you an example of one which was very interesting. There was I know when it was. So whenever we had the Uranus-Neptune conjunction, I was doing this. Okay. So we had Uranus, and prior to that, I think we had the Uranus. Yeah, it was around Uranus-Neptune. So it might have been that early 90s or mid 90s. But this particular race, I remember very clearly. I remember looking at a race with 24 horses. So to pick one out of 24 is pretty hard. And at the time, Uranus and Neptune were sitting on the midheaven of the chart very strongly, like right on, and they were closely conjunct. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then I looked for the horses in the race, and this leads me to the next point. So what I'm looking for, people go, well, how do you pick it? Do you look at the horse? Do you look at the jockey? Do you look at the trainer? Do you look at the chart of the horse? No, you look at the event. So in other words, if the midheaven does its job and it's the outcome and the pinnacle of the chart, then planets sitting up there should technically be related to the winning or the outcome of the event, which is therefore the winner, i.e. how it's going to be known in the public eye, which is what the 10th house is about. So I looked at the chart, and in this race was a horse called C Rhythm. Now, if you look at this book.
Oh, yes, I have that.
So the rulership book by Rex Bills. He describes in here, and this is probably a great book for anyone to get, where it's literally what astrological words, what words mean what relate to what particular planet or sign or house for that matter. And I didn't even have that book at the time, but I remember knowing enough to know that Neptune rules the sea. Mm-hmm. And I also knew that Uranus rules rhythm. So frequencies and rhythm. So I've gone, all right, C Rhythm. That's got to be the one that wins, because that's the only horse in the race that's name actually matches the planetary energies. And I looked at it, and it was like 66 to 1. And I go, oh, God, that's got no chance of winning in this big field. So anyway, I decided,
underdog.
I'll give it a go. I put $2 each way on, $2. And it won and paid $71.60. So I made for my $4 bet, I made about $180. And I'm like, God, why didn't I put $100 each way?
Well, that's hindsight. It's always 2020. But can I ask you, if you don't mind sharing?
Go for it.
What's the was that the biggest payoff that you've had in your
I've had another really hot. Well, this is the part that got.
What's the biggest payoff you've used astrology for a horse winner?
Well, I don't gamble very heavily. I put lots of money on. I'll use it more for testing purposes.
Yeah.
But it's what would be the most? I don't know. I probably won $2,500-3,000 on a race with not putting too much on. Would probably be my best one.
Sweet.
It varies, but what that'll take me into another thing. So next the next session on the podcast that we're going to do, the next Cosmic Pulse, we're going to have a gentleman on here that I've been working with, who's based out in New York, called Robert Geriatano.
Guaranteed. Oh,
Geriatano, I think it's called, or
okay.
Robert John, as he's likes to be known. And Robert and I. So when I did my lecture on this back with the IAA around 2020, was it?
Yep, I was there,
You were there.
2020 or
You
2021.
interviewed me. That's where we met, Jen.
Yeah. I think
So
you did two talks
I did a couple
actually,
of
because they
talks.
were
Yeah.
so popular.
Yes, so what I then, and this was literally and I will be doing more of these. So anybody who wants to come into the community, and when I say that, they'll obviously be like a paid session, because I don't want to just give away everything. And I'm also possibly even going to create a small course on teaching people who understand astrology how to do this. Okay, because at the end of the day, I'm human. I make mistakes. I don't get it right every time. And it's totally up to yourself. But what I can teach you is what to look for, and what to realize that if you decide you want to go down this path and you want to use the astrology to help you pick winners, that there's no guarantees. But I find 90% of the time when I fail, it's because I miss something. And in hindsight, it's easy to see. You
Yeah,
know what I mean?
I
But I
think
can
that's
teach you those
very,
techniques, how to avoid missing as much as you can.
I think it's fair to say that even like what to reiterate that it it's not guaranteed, but what is guaranteed in life? I mean, you go to the doctor, they can't guarantee, you know, uh, that
That
they
you're going
can
to fix the
cure
problem,
a
or even
disease.
understand
Like,
what your analysis is, what your problem is.
yeah, prescriptions, like medications, they do clinical testing and it's a statistically acceptable, and then they can go to release to market. But that's why they have all these side effects.
Yeah,
The economic forecasting, it's their patterns. Like they can't
that's right.
say for sure. You go to invest your money at the bank and they say, well, these are the patterns, but we can't guarantee that um in talking about the more volatile markets,
Yeah.
like what certain ones they can guarantee you're going to get your money back if for the more stable ones. But I'm just wondering, you know I don't think it's fair for those who are skeptical to astrology saying, well, you were wrong. Well, like everybody's human, that nobody can guarantee really anything
Well,
when you go for a service.
let me give you an
So
example. So,
yeah.
because and what you're saying is right, but it depends on how you want to do it, and I'll explain. So, Robert
Oh,
and
sorry.
I,
And the weather forecast.
yeah, weather
They
forecast.
can they forecast it, and then it's how much of the time. Anyway, go on. You and Robert.
Yeah, we call it the bomb, the Bureau of Meteorology here. Bomb, I reckon it's not the bomb, I can assure you. But it's anyway, that's another story. But the other thing I was going to say was, so with Robert and I, we concentrated, and how we got together is he sat in on my lecture that we did for the IA, and then he contacted me afterwards and said, "Can you help me with this? Blah blah blah. Would you like to sort of?" I said, "Look, you know what? It's going to help me learn more." So rather than me explaining to people when you're going to win, I then started working with Robert to find out if I could win on every race or any race I wanted to. Now that's hard. That's very hard, and there are other triggers and there are other things that influence. Because once again, in this situation, you're trying to pick races where there's absolutely no planet on the midheaven,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's nothing up there. So you don't have one ruling out over the other. So now you're working with a complex system of what makes one rule and win over the other. And that's what I've been refining. I'll also touch on it, Jen, and say
That's fascinating.
I've also done this for what do you call it, for poker machines, slot machines. Now that's an interesting
Oh,
one, just to see, because
okay.
what I've done is I've tested when I've wanted to test the timing of something. Okay, astrologically, if you wait for the horse race to be exactly there, you're not necessarily going to get it. So what you do
Yeah,
is
because they can have some
they can be
delays.
different times, and
Yeah, yeah.
well, not necessarily. But I'll give you another example. I'll show you something. This is part of what I'm doing. So I'm on my phone at the moment, but let me show you. There's a little thing on some of the winnings that I've got out of the poker machines. But let me just have a quick look and I'll show you. So I've also done things like research the charts. But here's a good one. This was November 23 last year. There's the, I'll have to explain this, but there's the winnings. Look, can you see that? $9,000.
Yeah.
That's even better. So that was with my partner, Lydia and I, but that's a whole other story. So, but I told her that we need to go up here and we need to gamble between this time and this time, and we should win money. We came out with the grand jackpot. So these sorts of things happen on a regular basis, but I'll show you one of the better ones. Let me show you a chart here.
Sorry, do you mean for listeners, these things happen for you on a regular basis? Like,
yes, but I'm
having
still
this window and then
still
engaging and then
so I'll show you
monetizing
something.
off of it.
Now, I know this is on here, but can you see here? And I know I should have done this another way, but if you have a look, see where the sun is down here on the chart.
Yeah, in the third house.
Yeah, and you can see the sun, my sun on the
you have to
circle is
yes, second house.
226 of Capricorn.
Yeah.
And notice where Venus is.
Of your chart, 13 Capricorn. Oh no, the transit.
Transit.
Yeah. Is that partile or exact?
It's exact. And have a look where the part of fortune is. 226.
Oh yes.
So I had Venus and the sun coming together at the same time in my chart. Now this is where the location was.
In
is that back to front for you when you're looking at it?
No, it's Gully, Australia, or
Tea Tree Gully. And it was at 6:38 on the 25th of January, 2024. That's this year. The point of it is I looked at it, and at 6:30 p.m. that day, I had organized with my partner and to meet up with her son and his cousin who he'd been living with up in Brisbane, and she was down, and another friend of ours and her sister. And we're all going to have this beautiful, lovely little meal at a place in Tea Tree Gully called Mangosteen, which is a great place. It's right opposite the road, over the road from the Tea Tree Gully Hotel, the pub. And they have poker machines there, or slot machines there. And I looked at this and I went, 6:38. I've organised dinner for 6:30. So I ring up her friend and I go, hey, we're going to pick you up a bit earlier. I'm going to go to the pub earlier. So you have to come with us. You can have a drink if you like. But at 6:30, you guys head across the road, literally to start the dinner. I need another 10 or 15 minutes because I want to be playing a machine right at that time. Okay. I want to see if this works. Okay.
And this is because Venus and the sun and part of fortune.
So there's another interesting point here. Have a look at that one. See where the moon is? Transit?
Yes.
It's about to hit my Jupiter. It's just entered Leo.
In your ninth.
Yeah.
In your ninth house.
In my ninth house. But what's important about this, and this is the interesting part, Jupiter is getting hit by the moon and it rules my second house of money. Venus, who is natally in my second house of money, is conjunct my sun, the ruler of my midheaven and the ruler of my Jupiter. So I've gone, this has to have some sort of outcome, right? That's what I'm thinking to myself. So anyway, we all got there and they went across the road. And it just as they're leaving to go across the road, I started sort of playing this particular machine. And just after they left, I got, where are we? You know, they talk about if you play slot machines, most people win when they get the random feature in games, and then all of a sudden they might get a bit of a win. Before that, you might win a little bit, but it's usually pretty rare. It's usually the feature. Everyone's looking for the feature. It's how they're programmed to get people's, what do you call it? Their brain going. What's the word for it? What's the part where they get, they get a rush?
The dopamine.
The dopamine. They get their dopamine rush. That's what yeah. And it's all for the negative part of what gambling's about. So with any sort of gambling, you've got to know when to walk away. And part of what I'm doing here is if I can teach people down the track, I'm not quite there yet for this one, but I will get there, that, if you're going to have advantage and you're going to potentially win, here's your time. Here, pick this. But at this point, leave. And I can explain why. because once it passes a certain point, it will start to lose. I even said to a gentleman at the pub the other day, here's an example, because I go up there sometimes and I'll just do my testing. That's where I go to my testing ground, because that's where it's up the road, and I can just go
So
up
in
there. Right?
Australia, they have slot machines in the pubs.
Yeah, they do. So
Okay.
I'll give you another example before I keep going with this. I remember we were coming back from a friend's place in a little country town across the other side. This is going back last year. And I said to Lydia, my partner, I go, look, hang on a second. I've just got to stop here at the pub. And there's this little pub with about 6 poker machines in it, 6 slot machines. I said, give me 10 minutes. I'm just going to test something. Right. The moon's where at this point, I'm just going to go check it. I need to do it now, because otherwise it's going to go on past. I said, give me 10 minutes. She's on the phone in the car with the car running out the front. And I said, I'll be back in 10. She's on the phone to her son. I walk in. I sent her a text and she didn't get the text. She was on the phone. I come back and I said, she thought that was quick. I said, yeah, I told you it's only going to be 10 minutes. And she goes, what? I said, did you win? I said, yeah, I won. She goes, what did you win? I said, have a pick. She goes, oh, a couple of $100. I said, no, 2,500. And I showed her, and she's gone.
In 10 minutes.
In 10 minutes. Because the timing was right. That's my point. Now, that particular one was this one.
That's a slot machine.
Yeah. But I was showing that I was on $162.
Oh, okay.
I changed it up to bet $5, and bang, got one, and it paid me $2,500.
Wow.
So I just sort of, part of it is also a little bit of intuition. Part of it is also the just trusting. And sometimes, and when you say trusting, facing the fear that, oh God, I'm going to lose at those times when you should win. But it's also knowing that sometimes you're not going to win, and you need to know your limit and you get out. Okay.
Right.
But generally speaking, if I turn my computer around there, you'd see a nice brand new kitchen in there that we renovated. We had to pay people in cash, and that paid for the renovation. So not just that one, the $9,000 as well, and everything else. So that's what we've been doing.
All in a minute's, like 10 minutes time.
That was 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Some other ones have taken longer. But I'll go back to that one I was just talking about at Tea Tree Gully, because there's an interesting point here, and I've got the chart there to show you.
The 6:30, the
6:38
6:35,
one,
yeah.
So what happened was they left, and at about 6:32, 6:33, instead of getting this random feature, like the feature that comes up and then you win on the games, I had this random jackpot winner just went off, and it paid me $400. And I'm like, wow, that's cool. But that was at 6:30, 6:33. So I'm playing along a bit more. I said, it's not 6:38 yet. I'm going to keep going. So I kept playing. And then at 6:36,
$1,000.
another 1,000, another random one, right? So, and I literally.
So then, but it wasn't 6:38. So you kept going.
6:36 on the same day. Have a look at, I already had the 400 I just won, and then another 1,000. So what I do?
But
at 6:36, no, I left.
Oh, okay.
I went, because the part of fortune. Okay, so I'll explain to you why. We're talking within 2 minutes of time. Now we know that the part of fortune moves very, very quickly. Like it's like within minutes, it will move off 1 degree to the next. It's moving like the Earth's turning, and every 4 minutes of time thereabouts, you're moving 1 degree of the zodiac on the horizon. So therefore, it's moving pretty quickly. So when you're playing with minutes and seconds, you're playing with a very small period of time. So I looked at that and thinking that even though I came up as 6:38 that I calculated, what if it really is 6:36? Like we're talking 2 minutes. We're talking that maybe my actual chart calculation that when I was born was out by 30 seconds or a minute or something.
I see.
You get it?
I love that.
I'm playing with the fact that I've got to be really sort of specific. And but what I'm getting at is that meant, so I've been doing the horse racing stuff, but this one's been very interesting because in some ways I won a lot more money because it tends to pay more, right? So,
what I like about that philosophy is because you've shared you're a Capricorn, and Capricorns are more cautious. So you
Oh,
were a little
very
bit more
cautious.
conservative.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was like, oh, because he won 400 and it was like not quite 638 and then it's 636. And I'm like, then 1,000. And I'm thinking like, I
And
guess
I
I
just
should
went,
just keep going.
logic tells me it ain't going to do it more.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
thought I'll keep playing just to see if anything else happens. And because I got it, so technically at that point in time, I had two random jackpots go off, random.
Which is like very rare
Rare,
anyway, right?
very rare. There's other stuff. So this
Yeah,
will be something that I will do lectures on, and we'll be able to do those within the community. It'll be sort of basically it'll be it'll be because it'll take me a bit of time and it takes a bit of effort.
fascinating.
We'll have to work through it. And it'll be events that we
And
can do.
I
But what we're going to do though, as you know, is coming up next week. Is it the King's Plate?
yes,
Yes, the King's Plate, one of the
yes,
big races in the
yes.
US. We're going to get
Canada,
in
Canada.
Canada, is it? Canada. Okay,
Yes, yes.
even better. So it's in your hometown, your area.
King's Plate, Commonwealth, right? I
Yeah.
don't think the US has the
Oh,
monarchy
there you go.
references.
Hello. Duh. I
Yeah.
should have realized.
No, it's okay.
When you go to the King, it's going to be something to do with the.
It was the Queen's Plate
Yeah.
for the longest time because of Queen Elizabeth II, but when she passed away and it's now King Charles III, they renamed it. And
Oh,
so last year, 2023, was the very first King's Plate that
okay.
all prior was Queen's Plate. So
You see,
yeah, that was a
I
bit of
might be
history.
studying this stuff, but I'm not a massive horsey person, in respect. I don't know what's going on. But I will say a couple of things in regards to the horse racing side. Um, Robert is an avid horse race enthusiast. You
And
are,
astrologer.
yeah, an astrologer, very very good astrologer, Uranian astrologer, and works a lot with the wheel, with the
Yeah,
dial.
dial.
Um, and we were talking about that the other day, and we will have another chat around that next week. But next week we're going to jump on this podcast, and you and Robert and I will share who we think will win
Yeah.
the King's Plate. And we'll go
Yes.
through, and we're not going to guarantee we're going to pick the winner, but we have a history of doing fairly well in that.
Yeah.
Robert and I, for example, I'll give you an example of what happened this year with Robert and I, where we've tried to combine our heads into winning a big win. Because in the US, when you have the Kentucky Derby or the Breeders' Cup, there is a big pools, so they pay out very.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Purse. The
the
purse money,
big
right?
purse, the purse money is huge. So we've tried for a number of years now to pick the pick six, which would pay out very very handsomely, and for the last couple of years, poor Robert and I say poor Robert and I, if we had a little bit deeper pockets and we could sort of bring a few other little horses in here and there and add a bit more and bet more, we would have won. But we don't. So we ended up with, in the pick six, we ended up with 4 out of 6 and 2 seconds. And we ended up with, therefore in the pick five, we got,
Which is close.
yeah, which is close. And in the pick five, we got, I think it was 4 out of 5
4,
and
yeah, yeah.
second. But you've got to remember there's no cigar for coming second. If you don't
Yes,
get
yeah.
them all, you
And
don't
just,
you don't make a cent,
yep.
right?
And for those who are familiar with horse racing, you will know what some of these terms are. But for some who are not familiar, a pick six or pick five would be that you have to pick,
5 or 6
say in
in
a
a
pick
row.
five, yeah, 5 consecutive winners
Winners.
of the first place
Yeah.
horses out of the 5 consecutive races, and then the
Yes,
similar for the 6,
that's
which
right.
is the more rare, which was a bigger payoff.
That's
If you
right.
can pick the 6 winners in a
So,
row,
so,
you get
so as
quite a
an
bit.
example with Robert and I think we picked, I think I worked out, well, I think last year we just went for the pick 5, I think, or maybe we did with the 6. But anyway, I remember looking at the 5 of the races. No, it was 6 of the races. So I looked at it and I said, okay, so we had a pool of say $400 that we were going to use to work on that day, and we were trying to work that. I think from memory it was around that. But let's just say it was $400.
This is like USD, right? For the
US
USD.
dollars. So
Yeah,
we looked at that and we sort of we're going to match things across. I then did a analysis and I said to Robert, okay, so let's do it this way. Because we're just missing out on these bigger ones,
Like just one,
Ultimately,
you're just one winner
ultimately what
off.
happens is we end up just
Yeah.
losing money. Okay.
But
Well,
it's only because you're one winner off though, but you're so close.
that's right. So, and
Yep.
look, if we did that for 5 years, 10 years, and won one, we'd have more than 100, probably 50 or 100 times more what we put in. So we'd have, you could win, you might even win anywhere up to $1 million. It's like good money, right, to win. So depending on how it's structured and how you bet and what the payout is and what the horses are that win. But this time, I think it was Kentucky Derby was May, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Breeders' Cup's coming up in the end of the year, in November. But in the Kentucky Derby, Robert and I sat down and I looked back and I analysed. Now, Robert, if I had just put an each way bet, just each way, on the horses in each race I picked would come first and second. So in other words, I usually pick four and I give it to him and say, look, you work it out, and we sort of go around and we work as a team. And I go, I would pick this one to come first, this one to come second. And sometimes for various reasons, because you're not sure which planet is going to hit off to be the winner. You know what I mean? Like you're not sure which one it's going to be. And so I said, look, if we did this, this is what would have happened. And I calculated if we put $20 each way on say the first 5 races, I think it was. So that's basically $40 bets on the 1 and $40 bets on the 2. And you do that by 5, there's your $400. So what I was doing is that's what I was doing. I was just looking to see if we did it on the first 5 races, we put the same money in doing it that way and just went for the each way bet. So, you're covering your tracks one way or the other. Our $400 would have netted us $4,500. So we didn't do too bad, actually, physically. We just didn't get the big payoff because we missed out by one here and there. So it's a matter of how you want to work your strategy. If you're conservative and you want to do it another way, if we were a bit more conservative, there's a good chance we possibly would have just had some money in the bank we worry about for later and build it up. So we're looking at how we're going to do that down the track. Because for me, I'm very busy doing other things. But even this weekend, Robert's going, can we look at a few races? Because I like to keep my hand in the pile. And also what I'm learning over time is as planetary positions change, i.e. Jupiter's now in Gemini. Last year when it was in Taurus, and I've got a Taurus moon and Jupiter's very fruitful, I have a strong feeling that a lot of my slot machine winnings, for example, also had something to do with the fact that Jupiter was in a favorable position for me. Since it's moved into Gemini and it's opposing my rising sign, it's moved into the 7th house, and it's going past other things, those same philosophies and the same aspects are not paying me as well. So I've got a funny feeling that there's another deeper level, and it will come with time, practice, and analysis, that I'll know what other factors are in play. And the reason I say it like that is because slot machines and poker machines is something I've only just recently done because it fell in. There have been times, there's some obvious ones, like when there was Jupiter at 15 of Taurus sitting on my node, Venus approaching 15 of Leo. It was about 13 of Leo in a square to it, about to hit my midheaven. And they're the two, one planet's in my 2nd house, the other one's the ruler of it. And I've gone, I reckon I should win. And and I gave it a shot and I couldn't do anything wrong. For about 24 hours, I took Lydia to that. We're in Sydney. I went to the casino and we talk about that random jackpot and those major bonuses. They rarely pay out. They very rarely pay out. You can play for a long time and not get one for a long, long time. Ask anybody who is a regular at the slot machines. That particular evening, I won 6 of them.
Wow.
And then I tested it further. I went with $50 each. Lydia and I were sitting down, putting money into the roulette wheel thing. I said, let's just try it here. She was getting really dejected because everything she was betting wasn't winning and everything I picked just came up. I was at $700 in about 2 minutes. I'm like, she goes, why? What? And I said, no, don't worry about it. It's not great to say it. You're the test case.
Don't worry, it's not you. It's not you.
But guess what?
It's me.
But when we won the $9,000 at the hotel around the corner, it was actually her that prompted.
Oh.
So it comes, and her moon sits on my Jupiter, so that makes it very on my ruling planet. So that's also fruitful.
Uh-huh.
So it was a combination of things going on, and it was a situation where um, we'd been discussing. We'd won a little bit of money, and I said to her, "Here, go and pull out." It was like $600 or something, and she went and got that from the bar. And she came back and she had every intention of putting a little bit more back in the same machine. And I had moved, and I said, "No, I think that's probably all we're going to win tonight." But because I said we were going to win, but I didn't know. And it was around 10:20 in the evening, I think it was, and I'd said between 9:30 and 10:30 we had that sort of hours window, which is a tough one because you got to know approximately. And don't forget, I would not encourage people to do exactly what I'm doing, but I'm testing. I'm working out what and how. So
Yeah, you're making
when I
educated.
make, yeah, and I say to
Yeah.
people, how can I say to you, Jen, hey, Jen, looking at your chart, why don't you go to play the poker machines now for the next hour, put in this much money and play it at this time for this 15, 20 minutes. And at that point in time, if you're not winning, just stop playing because you're not going to win anyway. And you go, hang on, why am I going to, just going to throw in $100 or $200 into a machine to just find out if I'm going to win, right? Unfortunately, that's what I've had to do. I've had to be prepared to lose as well as win. So I call it swings and roundabouts for me, but I'm doing the education. So, my son says to me, Dad, how much money you pulled out of your sports bet account? I went, nothing. And he goes, what do you mean nothing? I go, no. He says, you see what, you've only ever just lost. And I went, no, I'm learning. I go, so if I win, I leave it in there and I keep testing. And if I have to top it up a bit, I top it up. I said, hang on a minute. You go to university. How much is it going to cost you to go to uni? And he goes, oh, yeah. I said, but say you wanted to become a lawyer. What, $100,000, maybe more? And then you got this debt for the rest of your life. I said, what have I spent? A couple of $1,000s in 5 years. Right? It's not
And
about
you've won
education. Not about
$9,000.
education.
And you've won
That's
$9,000
right.
or more.
Oh, way more than that. Way more. I don't want to. I don't want to add figures to it, but there's a lot more than that because there's a bucket load of them in here. But they're only the ones I've taken photos of. Don't forget, I've lost money. But if I had to honestly say, am I up? I'm way up. Way up. I don't know. I haven't actually physically gone into a bank account. And the other thing is the problem is you see money coming out of the bank account when you decide, I'm going to pull a bit of cash out, but then you win and you keep the cash. I do have quite enough, like that $9,000 payout. No, they had to put it into the bank account. I've got quite a few of those. And it was also always around the one time. So very familiarly, I would go from one to the next, and I'd get these wins and they'd have to pay it into the bank account, $2,500 a year. I remember the one pool pub up the road in a small country town. It's totally illegal, but I said, don't worry about it. They didn't even have enough cash to give me. And I said, look, don't worry, I'll come back next week. So they gave me some. And I came back next week with my ticket and collected the rest. So,
Sweet.
I know I'm not, but I'm just saying.
But you've also shared your winnings. I
Yes.
know.
Well, see, when I won that
dinner and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. When I won that one at Tea Tree Gully, I went across the road and shouted dinner.
Yeah. Did you come up with a wad of cash and go, dinner's on me?
Yeah, dinner's on me.
And they were just
I think I won
gobsmacked.
1,400, but it cost me about 700 for dinner for everyone. But that's all part and parcel. I said, look, swings and roundabouts, don't worry about it. Someone's looking after me. That's how I see. It's part of it's in some ways with what I'm doing there. And you said I'm cautious because I'm a Capricorn. Don't forget, I'm also a Sagittarius rising. And that good old ruling Jupiter is in the 9th house, which means it's in its home house, the ruler of Sag, and it's in Leo. It might be retrograde, but it's in Leo. So the chances, a desire to actually take chances on things sometimes outweigh that fear of even doing anything.
Well,
So
I
it's a
think
bit of
it's like
a
you
dichotomy.
said,
It's
a calculated risk, right?
That's
And if you're too
100%.
conservative, you don't invest in the stock market, you're like actually losing apparently
Yeah.
because people are investing. So you need a little bit of risk.
Yeah.
It's just a good blend combination, right?
That's exactly right. So it's been an interesting ride along the way. And as I
I
said,
find it fascinating.
it's I've got lots and lots of stories about it. What was the story I was going to tell you? We're going right back to when. Oh yeah, we'll go back to the beginning. The beginning when I said, um, what's the word for it? When I said, okay, so I won 10 horse race winners in a row. 10. Remember at the very beginning when I first started
Yes.
doing it, and then
Do
the
you
next.
remember the track, like the race? Was it a
Oh, there were
like
various races. I've got.
oh,
I mean,
okay.
I could even share my screen and show you something now, but I won't do it right now.
Was it
No,
like at
it
one
was
track or were you at
no,
like different
it was
tracks? And
just
okay.
over. It might have been
Okay.
over a period of weeks.
Gotcha.
I
Gotcha.
wanted to find planets in
Oh,
basically on the
wow.
midheaven at that stage. That's what I was only looking at, and then I wanted to see if they won, and then I found that they don't always win, and there was a good reason behind it. And this led me on another path of investigation further into the astronomy of it all. And I'll because I'm how are we going for time?
When you mean the astronomy, do you mean like fixed stars?
No, I mean the physical nature of, say, planets turning, for instance. So, in other words, depending on how fast a planet rotates, often depends on how much influence it has. Um, for example, the sun and moon rotate fairly slowly. So does Mercury. So does Venus. Venus is very slow. It's like 243
You
days
mean like on their
once
own
on
axis,
their own
the planet?
axis.
Okay.
Yeah. But Mars, for instance, turns pretty quickly. It's about 24 hours, 32 minutes, that sort of thing. Jupiter spins like a mofo because it's like 9 hours and 50 minutes to go on a day cycle. So it's like a big top. It's flying around. Saturn is not dissimilar. I think it's about 10 hours, 17 or something like that. And Uranus and Neptune, about 17 hours each. And Pluto is also fairly slow. So what I found was when I and the moon, and I said the sun and moon are fairly slow. But what I find is the sun and the moon, they tend to be triggers. They trigger things, but they don't necessarily on their own um, work as the winning planetary energy. So, for example, if I had the moon sitting on the midheaven of a chart, it won't indicate that a moon-based horse or moon-named horse after the moon,
Mm.
like call it Cuddles or whatever, um, won't win. Okay, and same with Venus. If I had Venus sitting up there, it tends, and that's what happened to me the first time. I had Venus on the midheaven, thinking, "Oh, it's going to win." I picked a horse which with a Venusian name. I'm going to say, call it, Daisy Girl or something like that, where it's a flower and a girl, and that's sort of Venus, and that's double Venus. Came nowhere, even though it was the only Venus horse in the race, for instance. So I thought, why? Why didn't it win? But when you come to things like Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, they're very
Mm.
reliable. And then you look at it and go, well, why is that? Why is Neptune reliable? Why is that reliable when it's so far away from us gravitationally? Like you'd think, what the hell? And that led me to look further into it, and primarily what I've found, and I share a little bit of this on my YouTube channel, and I'll probably share more of it with people down the track. But I
No
believe,
pun intended.
yeah,
Down
yeah,
the track.
down the
No
track,
pun
yeah, no,
intended.
no pun intended. But it's and because I'm still investigating. I mean, life's a long journey. But the discovery of things like neutrinos, which are subatomic particles, and
Yeah.
they pass through all matter. In actual fact, they're so small they barely even interact with an atom. So, but there's trillions of them going through us every second. They're the only particle. They are basically the creators of the universe. So they're the only things that can change between matter and antimatter, and they change flavor. There's
Mm.
different types of them, and this has only really been discovered last century that they even potentially existed. That was hypothesized in about 1930. Then they found evidence in about 1956, and it wasn't until about the 1980s that they really understood that they could see these things. And the interesting thing about when a neutrino interacts with a particle, what it does is it creates what? It creates a burst of light. Now, if you think about the universe is basically the creation of light. So an IE, and then when you think about black holes, and I'm being very logical here, a black hole is just sucking all that light in and disappearing. So
Mhm.
Why would that be the case? You've got two creations. You've got the creation of light and the creation of dark. What's that sound like? It sounds like good and evil. It
Yin
sounds
and
like heaven and
yang,
hell. It sounds like all of the different things, the mechanics of the earth, the
the
mechanics of the universe.
dualities.
Yeah, the dualities of it. And so these neutrinos, I believe, and we already know they are created. They are created by certain bodies within the universe, and each star creates neutrinos and generates them out. So our sun is a star, and it's creating its own neutrinos. And the interesting thing about those is that neutrino particles travel slower than light particles, but they actually reach Earth before light does. And you go, how would that happen?
Yeah.
In that minute milliseconds of a second, photon particles bounce off each other before they take off. Neutrinos have already
Oh,
gone.
so it slows them down.
Slows them down that ever
Mhm.
so little bit more. So these are the sorts of scientific things that I go, okay, well, this makes sense. So why would, going back to Everton and cosmobiology and midpoints, and why would they be very important? Why would Pythagoras be going all about mathematics and powers and triangles are stronger than squares and all the rest of the bits and
Mhm.
pieces? Is because that's you could say the physics of the world, of the universe, and therefore certain aspects are free flowing, certain aspects are combative,
Frictional. Yeah.
yeah, frictional. They
Yeah.
create friction.
More
So
tension.
why? So what would make us think for 1 second that there's not one thing we do know is that the sun creates these neutrinos, it sends them out into the universe, and each little body that is spinning picks them up, absorbs them, and redirects them out in another direction. So they're creating their own, like a little emanation. Okay, they're emanating their own neutrino body, you could call it. So they're
Like a
collecting.
chain reaction.
Yeah.
Like a chain.
What happens is as the planets are moving around the sun, because we're all embodied in the sun, we're all in the same gravitational area. We're all working in conjunction. And the mechanics of it, who's to say that a planet spinning isn't sending out something or a force that interacts with our lives?
Field.
When I
Yeah.
say
Yeah.
lives, souls, the energy created by the planet and everything else. Now, an example of it is this. Mars is a tiny planet. Venus is much bigger than Mars. Venus is nearly the size of Earth. But Mars, astrologically, and when you see it, the physical effect that is given to Mars is that it's destructive and it's divisive and it's energetic and it creates conflict, causes war, heat, frustration. So the main one is heat and frustration, all those sorts of things that come out of
Action.
Mars. Action
Action.
and drives and
Competition.
yeah, but
Yeah.
also beginning of events. So the division sometimes is about,
Initiation.
yeah, think about a seed. When a seed has to germinate, it has to split, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to create that life. So if this little planet is having that much of an influence, timing wise, because we can't see the physical effect, but if it's having that much influence, who's to say it's not sending out something to us in a certain format, or it's producing accordance to its physical size? What I believe is that if Venus spun at the speed that Mars does, there would not be any life on the planet. It's all part of the balance because Venus, and that's why she absorbs, she attracts because she's spinning really slow. So therefore, astrologically, she tends to be a beneficiary to where we sit, whereas Mars tends to be, something that causes division. So energetically, the further it goes out, the more they spin. So just because something's Neptune's miles away doesn't mean it's not having a physical effect on us or a concentrated physical effect because it's sending these out from a distance and sitting in the same spot for a long time, whereas inner planets move a bit faster. So I'm being a little bit mechanical here. Sorry to jump off, but this is
No.
part of the mechanics, I believe, as to why the planets do have a physical effect on us. And this is also.
Well, and what you were just talking about, um, made me think of this research that NASA released just this year,
Yeah.
that there is this orbital resonance. These are scientists
Yep.
using this language that astrologers like to use, resonance, that um, that Mars now appears to affect Earth's climate and deep ocean currents, similar to like the pull of the moon, the gravitational pull of the phases of the moon at the new and the full moon have
Yep.
on water. And so this is like scientific evidence that is very new, that is reaffirming your theory.
Exactly. And why I think we haven't worked it out yet is because we can't measure these particles on a physical sense because they're so small. So we're trying to get to that. We can mathematically sort of work it out, and we can logically look at how things work, and we can quantumly associate. But I believe that these energy fields that are being sent out collect in our bodies, i.e., in our spirit selves, so our energy fields, and when they're in disharmony, it reflects in our physical bodies. So
Yeah.
and so therefore, from a mood point of view, a physical point of view, a thought point of view, anything that, as these things are shifting and moving, that's the interaction. So what I've been trying to work out is, okay, so which ones can I rely on to have more influence than another at a particular point in time? And that's the key to picking the winners. So
Beautiful.
without being too complex, that's sort of how it works. And it is something that we can teach people. I remember when I first started doing this, and I just worked on my basic principle of the midheaven and look for that only, and don't worry about the rest. But if you rely on this, you'll win. And sure enough, you can use that. When I was at SARS one time, I can't remember the lady's name. She was a little older Greek lady at the time, and she came to me and she said, "Oh, hi, Lee." And I was doing another lecture on something else, and I said, "Yeah." She goes, "Just wanted to say thanks." And I go, "Why?" She goes, "Well, I used your philosophies on the horse racing the other day, and I won $2,500."
Did she give you a $500 tip?
No, that's what I was going to say. I felt like saying to her, "Where's my commission?"
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah.
but I thought, no, that's fine. I said, that's awesome. So
That's a beautiful
it's,
story.
and I knew that, and they're sort of the reaffirming things. Ask Greg Clare. Greg will say, "Oh no, there's definitely something in it," because when he used to sort of get into my head, and that's when we used to chat about it way back then, back in the 90s. And then he went off and did lots of stuff. I went off into the corporate world instead and left astrology on the shelf for a while. So that's part of why I'm coming back into the astrology side. As I said earlier, I want to start bringing astrology more to the people, these sorts of things, because you don't have to be. It's not airy. It's not just airy fairy like some people say. In actual fact, some of these so-called airy fairy subjects are very powerful. I mean, I read tarot cards. I'm quite psychic. I was that way as a kid, but I don't profess to be that way. I don't advertise myself as a psychic, but I have taught people how to read tarot and that sort of thing. Why? Because
Nice.
when I was about 16 and I was shown cards for the first time, I knew what they all meant.
Wow.
You can't, I went through, oh, that one means that, and that one means that. I got a little bit wrong, but not really. There's a deck right there. So, it's
Nice.
I don't use them all the time, but I have taught, and I probably will teach down the track as well, because that's something I do well. But the problem with teaching tarot, it's not as easy to do as an online thing. It really, I think, physically, I think you've got your visiting cat behind you.
Yes, I'm trying to just.
It's all right. You can pick her up. Yeah. What's her name? Yeah.
Oh, that this is. I think he's trying to say that he's
Not getting enough
hungry.
attention. Yeah.
Yes, he's
Yes.
just knocked over my IAA diploma.
Oh, good on you. Yeah. Probably trying to do. Yeah. Probably.
It's
There
a
we go.
message.
That's a
He's
message. Yeah.
yes, he's
Yeah. I want food. Yeah.
he's
See.
the he's the yang of the his brother's like the yin, just watches him and learns. He's like, I like talking about experimenting.
Yes.
He uses his brother to judge what he's going to do. So he's like, I'll watch you and see what happens, how it goes for you, and then I'll decide what I do.
What am I gonna do? Yeah. Just like the brother that pushes the other one in the pool to see how deep it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Oh, great. Oh, don't you just love them? So yeah, look, all right. Well, look, what I was going to say, I reckon, do you want to leave it there, Jen?
yeah. I
So
mean,
what we can.
I think it's great because I loved attending your lectures on horse racing, and I think it was very clear, and I think it's a lot of fun to do, and I look forward to you sharing more of your refined techniques. I don't know many other people or anybody out there doing what you're doing with the horse racing
I don't know anyone
context.
either. I'd like to
Yeah.
find a couple of others so I can ask them their experiences as well. So if anyone's out there that does this as well, let me know and contact me, and we can share notes, because it is literally still work in progress. I got to say, but I'm at a point now where I have no qualms in educating and teaching people what I know, because from that their experiences they're going to determine. We're all going to find out more. But the
Just going
idea
to
of it
enrich the
is,
overall field.
yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot to tell you, I was going to say before that, I said the other day when I went up to the hotel and we were talking about it, um, I went in because I thought I'm just going to have a look to see. I knew there was good aspects for winning, right? I say it like that. And I walked in there and there was a couple in there, an older couple, and they were just winning. There's this guy playing this machine. And sure enough, he's winning. And it's the same one that paid the other day. And I went, wow. And he's already at $2,500 on here. Like he's winning, right? And I went, oh, and I said, just me, because I might not talk to anyone. I say, hey, you don't find out unless you ask. And I said, oh, this machine paid someone the other day as well. He looks at me and goes, yeah, that was me. So he'd already
Oh,
won on the same machine. He came back as winning again.
oh, wow.
Meanwhile, I didn't realize, but his wife is sitting on another machine and she's winning as well. They're both just going winning, 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 winning. And I've gone, this is strange. So I went out to the bar and I was speaking to the barman and the manager there, and he said, yeah. He said, you want to go and ask them their star sign, don't you? And I went, yeah, I do. So anyway, and what I looked at the time and what I was testing, just so you know, there was a Moon Mars conjunction. Okay, so where Mars is in Gemini and the Moon was coming up to be conjunct that, and I wanted to see whether that was going to be working for or against. But it was right on this Moon Mars conjunction, like literally coming up to that exact moment, and there'd been a build up to it the day before when this guy had been winning. So without knowing anything else, because I can't go and investigate, I don't know their charts, I can't sort of work it out. I did find out that he was a Scorpio and born on the 10th of November. So his sun is ruled by Mars. So then I went back and I went to the barman and I said, oh, hey, guess what? Show you something. Look, Moon conjunct Mars. His ruling planet is being hit by the Moon. Look, he's winning right now. But my philosophy was this. When that Moon passes Mars, which was about to do, stop betting. You're going to start losing. The energy's gone.
And what happened?
Well, hang on. Let me finish.
Oh, sorry.
Then I go, I've got to find out her birthday. But how do you ask a couple of older people what their star signs are, right? Because half of them don't believe it anyway. They come from a generation that don't want to know about it. And so I ended up sort of, hanging around, just sort of trying to work it out. And then I went over and I eventually chatted to her. And I asked her, I said, so he's a Scorpio. When's your birthday? She goes, oh, I'm on the 29th of March. And I've gone,
Aries, Mars.
Aries. They're both Mars ruled and they're both winning. Right. So I went and I said to the barman, won't mention names, I've already mentioned too many. I said to him, before that, I said, look, I guarantee you, he's a Scorpio. I guarantee you she's either a Scorpio or an Aries. She'll be another Mars rule because they're both winning. I came back with the knowledge that, yes, she was an Aries. I've gone, Wow. So my point was this. I went to test. I was in there and the moon Mars didn't work for me. Anything I touched, I lost. Didn't work for me. But for them, they couldn't put a thing wrong. They were in that mode. So this is part of I haven't refined that exactly yet, but that's my work in progress. As I've shown you a couple of things today, some of them are pretty spot on. There is another factor we need to take into consideration, and that is whether somebody's chart is relatively lucky or whether it's relatively not, right? That's another factor that may come into things. So it's all of those things that we can discuss in further detail down the track. But our next Cosmic Pulse will be with Robert. And
Robert,
we will give it a go with the King's ex-Queen's plate.
Yeah, and I hope some of the people who are in the horse racing industry listen in, and I hope that helps them too, because the people who are in the horse racing industry have been one of the most open-minded to astrology. They're like, whatever works, that's gonna help you win and make you money. No judgment.
Well, I'll tell you now, it's one of those things. If anyone wanted to be an astrologer or get into astrology for a particular reason, we might have just given you one.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. I'd one say, if you have a horse that you think, call me up. I'll be on the phone with you, Jen, anytime.
Yeah, that's right.
And he's in London, England.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, thanks so much, Jen.
Thank you, Luke.
And we will leave the podcast here, and we'll return in a week's time. I think it was a week. We'll be in a week's time in this case, simply because of the fact we've got maybe a little bit earlier than a week, because we've got the thing with the podcast. They will be a little bit random. We'll try and do the Cosmic Pulse every and with different speakers and different people we interview. But there will be a period coming up where there's going to be a number of these horse racing based ones, simply because it's that horse racing time of year.
Yes.
So we will do a few of these, but they will always be done probably the day before. As soon as we get the guide, we can pick the races and then we can put them up. They might be a little bit raw, but they will be available for people to watch. And let's see how we go and see if we can win some.
Yeah, exciting.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. And that concludes our first episode of the Cosmic Pulse New Generation.
Thank you. See ya. All right.